Hi everyone. I wanted to put together this quick video just to kind of bring people up to speed with what I've been up to lately. And it's been primarily playing with tools by a company called Smith Micro. And these are graphic tools. The tools are specifically Manga Studio, Anime Studio, Poser, and Motion Artist. Now I'm giving my experiences, which are very limited with these tools. I just happened to stumble upon these tools, thought that they were kind of neat, and I thought I'd lay down some of the information that I'd gathered so far that I wish I had access to when I started using the tools. So let's get started. First, I want to talk about that the tools break down primarily into four categories. There's a thing called Clip Studio Paint Pro or EX. It doesn't quite trip off the tongue like its old name, which was Manga Studio 5. Those are equivalent. Don't get confused if you see or hear the two of them. Clip Studio Paint EX is the same as Manga Studio 5 EX, and that happens to be the extended version. Next, we have a 2D graphic product called Anime Studio, and here we happen to be showing the Pro 11 version. Then they have a 3D animation product called Poser, which I use extensively. And finally, there's a product called Motion Artist, which seems to pull everything together to present it in an interesting way, or at least I'm going to show you what I think is an interesting way. Now, this is all available at smithmicro.com/consumer. If you just go to smithmicro.com, you're going to end up seeing all their other products and not just their consumer graphics products, which is what these are. Now, I want to break these down as to what each of these tools do and the versions of them. So let's jump right into that. The first is, if you want to draw comics, then Clip Studio Paint Pro or Manga Studio 5 is pretty much becoming the standard. Now, its big competition, interestingly enough, is Adobe Photoshop, of course. If you already have that product, you probably don't need this one. You have the big boy in the room as far as doing things. Now, notice that there is a Pro and an EX version of this tool, and I'm going to talk about what the cost is as far as upgrading and what's in them. Next, we have 2D graphics, which I don't have a lot of experience with. I own Anime Studio Debut and not the Pro version, whereas I do own the Clip Studio Paint EX version. And I don't have a lot of experience with this product, so I'm going to have to report in later. In the meantime, I use Poser 11 a lot. I upgraded briefly to the Poser Pro 11 version, but I thought that paying $175 for an upgrade on a $200 product was excessive, and I got my money back, which they actually were willing to return. Finally, if you want to add some motion to your comic strips, then you can do it through a product called Motion Artist. We happen to be at version 1.3 right now. So those are the four products that I'm going to talk about. And it's significant to talk about the different versions because, oh, here comes a detail-laden chart, but we're going to break it down and look at it one at a time. Clip Studio Paint Pro right now is going for $20. Now, if you get nothing else from this page, notice that there's a huge price variance. So shop for a deal. I just picked up the deal of picking up the EX extension to Clip Studio Paint for $87. Now notice the alternative to this product is Adobe Photoshop, and if you have that, you don't need this product at all. You should be going and looking at Photoshop classes. You've got the Premiere product already. Now notice that the EX extension provides little more than multiple comic page management and export. In other words, you can create an entire comic book in the EX version, whereas in the Pro version, you have to create your comic book and export it a page at a time and put it together using something else. Now, I would say that $20 is a great deal on the Pro version if you happen to stumble upon it, but I would actually be willing to pay the extra $67 to get the EX version. I wouldn't be willing to pay $209 for the EX version, so watch out for deals. Here, once again, Anime Studio, I know little about it. I paid $29 for an upgrade from Debut 10 to Debut 11, and that's all I know. Poser. I've been using Poser 11. I bought it for $199. I bought an upgrade for $175 to Pro, and then I returned it. Because the Pro version, the only thing that it gives you as an extension is the fitting room. So fitting closes to close to characters. I thought $175 was a lot of money for that. Now notice that Poser 11 itself has a competitor, a free alternative known as Daz Studio. Now I've downloaded that as well and have played with it. So far I'm more comfortable with Poser because that's where I started, but both tools seem to be pretty equivalent. So check out Daz Studio. Finally, if you want to add a little motion to your comics, then pick up Motion Artist. I think it's a really fun little tool, but this is, the icing on the cake. So what software and hardware is required to run this stuff? Well, you have to have the latest Mac or Windows OS. I happen to be running Windows 10 and a high-end PC or Mac with at least 8 gigabytes of memory. This is to support both real-time and rendering. Rendering takes forever. The more memory, the better. I wish I had 16 gigabytes on my system, but I only have 8. And you also need a lot of disk space. I have 2 terabytes of disk space on my system, and I'm 1/4 full so far with graphics files. And finally, this is a requirement you may not have thought of, but if you're going to draw, which means particularly you're going to use Manga Studio and you're going to do digital drawing, you will need a tablet. And I happen to own a Wacom Intuos Pro Medium, and I want to talk with you about what that means. So let's look at some pictures. Here on the left, we have the Wacom Cintiq tablet. And notice the wild price ranges from all the way from $800 up to $2,500. These are the systems where you actually get to see what you're drawing on. This is what all drawers and graphic artists drool over, but the price is so extensive. So this particular device is out of reach for most of us. What I have is the Wacom Intuos Pro Medium. Now the reason that I got the medium instead of the small is because I have a 27-inch monitor, and I was told or saw advice online that said you should get a bigger tablet, go with the medium instead of the small when you have 27-inch monitors. Now, the final option that you've got, if you notice the price here, you're talking about $300 for the medium, but only less than $100. I've seen them down to maybe, say, about $84.99 for these Wacom Intuos Art Pen and Touch small tablets. Now, notice that there are Wacom small Intuos tablets for as little as $74, but they don't have this touch capability. In other words, you can use touch gestures, you can use 2-finger gestures, you can pinch things to zoom in, you can, and so on. You're going to want that in your tablet. It's worth paying the extra $15 or so. So make sure you pay attention to that. And in talking with my brother, he said that he once owned a Wacom medium and returned it and got the small because he found that it's much easier to draw and to traverse the screen with the small. And based on his experience, I haven't noticed that, or his comments. I've noticed that it is a little hard to traverse the screen with my tablet. So I'm going to go with my brother's choice here and recommend the less expensive Wacom tablet if you don't have one. Consider, $85, as little as that. Now, what additional hardware and software? I have a Blue Yeti USB microphone that I'm recording this little talk using. I use it sometimes to narrate my cartoons. You might consider it. I use a product called Camtasia Studio 8, the video editor, to pull everything together in a timeline and mix it with music. And speaking of music, I use Magic's Music Maker 2016 to produce music that's free for me to use, and you're going to hear examples of that in the videos that you're going to see. And I use Audacity sometimes to record my voice and add it into products. Now, be sure also to account for the purchase of scenes, figures, and props all kinds of additional extensions to the base products that you can buy. Those cost money. Now, to talk about how much money, here I'm probably in just putting my graphics stuff together, including the expensive $300 tablet, to $688. And then I've got some other tools, and we're talking about $1,200. But before I scare you away, look at this instead. Here's an entry-level digital artist investment. I would recommend that you get Manga Studio 5 EX for $87. But if you get the deal of $20 and you just are really strapped for cash, go for that. Get Daz Studio for free. Pick up Motion Artist if you'd like to play with adding a little motion to your comics, and it's only going to be about $30. And then I'd recommend around in the price range of $85 to $100 for a Wacom small tablet, but make sure it has that touch feature so that you can use your finger gestures to manipulate your art. Now, I'm going to show you 3 videos that I put together and what I've used to put them together before I show you the use of the tools to work on these. So the first one is to get poses and renders. I used Poser 11 for this video, which is called A Man Walking in the Rain intro. I then merged them with backgrounds and dialogue balloons in Manga Studio 5 to create a standard cartoon. So I had 3D heads and characters and stuff like that being merged into Manga Studio because I didn't want to draw. And then I used Motion Artist to add some movement to those cartoons. I finally pulled everything together with sound and so on in Camtasia Studio, and I put it out to this URL, which you're seeing down at the bottom of the screen. Now, there's no way I'm going to read you this URL. You're just going to have to pause this video and go and type it into a browser if you want to go watch this video. Okay, once you get done, then we're going to talk about another video that uses fewer tools. It's a book trailer for a series called Butterscotch Jones, and it's just the beginning of it. It uses Poser to render a plane, and it uses background clouds and a person's head, and then it skips Manga Studio because I wanted this cartoon to be more dynamic. So the individual pieces inside of the cells of the comic can be moved with Motion Artist if you eliminate Manga Studio. So this is an example of doing that. And once again, I pulled it all together in Camtasia Studio 8 with the sounds at the end. So check out this example for just using these 2 tools. Finally, we have an example where I created a 3D animated video, and I used Camtasia Studio to pull together sounds and to edit and so on, and this is the location of this video. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is Poser. You notice that shows up in every one of the scenarios that I talked about, and so I'm going to show you how Poser 3D posing works. See you soon.